Scouting Combine 2026 day is really kind of getting cooking, and, well, it's not going to get cooking without our next guest. That's Ted Nguyen from The Athletic. And, Ted, thanks so much for your time. Definitely appreciate you. I can't remember exactly what the name of the piece was, and so bad on me, but I swear you put a piece out just recently about the offensive line and, Clint Kubak, and obviously Rick Dennison is going to be the OC, the offensive line coach, I should say. What was it exactly? It was something about the offensive line and how they could put that together.
It was about Clint Kubak and his scheme and how he's going to apply that scheme with the Raiders. And the offensive line definitely is a big piece of it. I think one of the strengths of Kubak's offense is it takes a lot of stress away from the offensive line because you're not asked to do as many drop back pass protection sets, which is the most difficult thing in football, than you would in a normal offense. Like you look at the Seattle team, they're extremely explosive, but they also led the league in run rate. They ran the ball a ton. Even when they struggled to run the ball, they were still running the ball, and they were able to create explosive off-play action. And I think through week 13, I believe it was, they had the highest explosive passer rate since the Greatest Show on Turf Rams.
Okay.
Yeah, in 2001. So they were extremely explosive offense. And then defenses kind of figured some things out with them. They kind of just ignored the run and played a little bit more sub-personnel to stop those explosive passes. And then they got really good at running the ball. So then their offense kind of became a complete unit. And that's a sign of good coaching is when you could see improvement throughout the season. You definitely saw the run game go from one that was pretty inefficient to one that was an explosive unit down the line.
Yeah, down the stretch, they had to have that run game. Right?
Yeah.
That run game was essential for them to be able to be the champions, obviously the defense as well. The zone blocking scheme, as you know, has never really worked for the Raiders.
Yeah.
And I asked Clint Kubak about that on his opening day in the press conference, and he said it's about repetition. Is it that simple, or is there something more to it that can help the Raiders as a team be able to actually use that blocking scheme?
Well, I wrote about that too. Like the Raiders have tried a couple times recently to run that outside zone system, but I think it really depends on the coaching. Like the first time they tried to run it with Luke Getsy wasn't really an outside zone guy. I mean, he was in that offense with the Packers for a couple of years, but it's a big difference between just being the quarterback's coach in that offense. And they kind of moved away from the outside zone at that point anyways, to where you're going to Kubiak, who is an outside zone savant. His dad was a founding father in this offense, played for Mike Shanahan. So this guy knows outside zone through and through. Rick Dennison knows outside zone through and through. They know the details of it. They know how to coach it. They know the counters that come off of it. So it's one thing to just try to run a system, but it's another thing to truly know it and to truly be able to teach it from the ground up. And I think that's where the difference that Kubiak will bring trying to install this offense. And to me, I think the personnel fits that too. So I think, and when they try to install it with Chip Kelly's not really an outside zone guy. He's a shotgun run type of guy. They implemented a little bit more gap scheme when he was at Ohio State. But to me, it was more of Pete Carroll wanting to run the system, Chip Kelly trying to run it, but it's not really his system. We know the mess with Brendan Carroll, and it was just like a big convoluted mess.
Right.
So we haven't really seen the Raiders make a real good effort to run it, even though they tried to run it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because that was one of the first things I thought about when I knew Kubiak was going to get hired. I was like, okay, I know what they do. This is the Shanahan tree. This is the Kubiak tree. It's that outside zone blocking, and so it's not easy, but if you do it, it's very effective.
Yeah.
I mean, look how many 1,000-yard running backs there were back in the day that were 4th, 5th, 6th-round picks. It could be very effective, but you got to run it right. So I guess that takes us to the million-dollar question, and Ted Nguyen's with us here from The Athletic. JPJ, Colton Miller, where's your confidence level with the personnel that they currently have as opposed to what they need to go get?
I do think that the line has a little bit more talent than relative to how they performed last year. I just think the coaching thing was a mess.
Yeah.
I think there wasn't alignment within the own coaching staff with how they wanted to run things. I think the scheme left a lot to be desired as far as having answers to different fronts that they saw. I think from a technical standpoint, they were a mess. I mean, there's stuff that you should be able to handle from a coaching standpoint, like how to pick up a blitz, things like that, how to pick up a stunt, like they just couldn't do those simple things. So I think with better coaching, we'll see a little bit better performances from this offensive line. To me, Colt Miller is going to be a mainstay. Jackson Powers-Johnson, whenever he's on the field, you can see those flashes of him being a really great offensive lineman. I think he's a little bit better fitted for guard.
Okay.
We saw flashes from Charles Rogers. Charles Grant we saw flashes from. But I still think you can't be satisfied with just saying, oh, here's Charles Grant showed a little promise in 2 quarters, and we're going to say he's our tackle of the future. I think you do have to add to that tackle room and maybe find somebody to compete with DJ Glaze, and maybe if you find somebody to replace Glaze with, maybe Glaze has some opportunity to move inside as well. I do think center is a big need for this team. In Kubiak's offense, that zone blocking system, you need to have that point of attack center be a legitimate player. Also in this system, the center's making all the calls in this offense. It's not the quarterback. The quarterback does have final say to change it, but the center is the guy who's going to set the protections. He's going to point to the mic. He's going to do all those things. And there's some questions to whether Jackson Powers-Johnson can handle it, which is why he was moved to guard by 2 different staffs already. So finding a center is going to be important. The Ravens announced today that they offered Linderbaum, who is everybody's favorite free agent.
He is.
A market resetting deal. So maybe he doesn't see free agency. Maybe he does decide to test free agency. I think if he does, the Raiders are going to give him a pretty sizable offer. Because, again, I do think the center is such an important part of this offense.
When it comes to Linderbaum, there was stats that were out there, and I know analytics are something that you kind of take with a grain of salt from time to time, but it basically said, like, Linderbaum had a bad pressure rate. Like, he gave up a lot of pressures, and I saw something follow up from you about, Lamar holds onto the ball a long time. Kind of what's the compare and contrast there?
Yeah, I mean – Raven fans kind of killed me for that because they're so they want to defend Lamar, and I'm a huge Lamar advocate. Like if you just search Lamar Jackson on my Twitter, I defend him all the time.
Right.
But last year he held onto the ball a lot more than he does normally, and usually he's really good at that balance of when to hold it, when to try to play make, when to get rid of the ball. But it just felt like last year at times he held onto the ball longer, which does increase the ask that you put on your offensive lineman. I think Linderbaum had to, his pressure rate suffered because of that. Also, when you don't, at the center position, you're not really blocking one-on-one a ton. Your guards are going to be helping you a lot, and when you have poor guard play, that's going to affect you. I think that affected Linderbaum. And when you look at the stat that I posted was pass block win rate, which is the ESPN stat that measures how many times or the rate in which you can sustain block for 2.5 seconds or longer. So, I think that gives you a little bit more accurate measure of of an offensive lineman independent of the quarterback. And in that metric, he ranked 4th overall among inside offensive linemen, which is really impressive. I don't think Linderbaum is like an elite pass rusher, but I definitely don't think he's anywhere close to being a bottom tier pass blocker, and he's an elite run blocker.
Well, that's what they need. That's what they need. Obviously, they got to build this thing from the inside out.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt about this is not going to be an overnight project. I think that we all know that. What else do you see that Clint Kubiak's going to need, like the non-negotiables in this offense to make it go?
You definitely need everywhere he's been, he's had a pretty good fullback.
Okay.
Because getting into 21 personnel is a big part of what he does. But I don't necessarily see it as a need because you can go to 12 personnel and you can base a lot of your offense out of 12 personnel and do a lot of things he wants to. But I do think that he would like to find a good fullback and be able to go to 21 personnel. I don't think that they'll be as heavy 21 personnel as they were in his previous stops in Seattle and New Orleans, but that would be a good luxury pick to have. And finding a good receiver a good blocking receiver is important too. I think theoretically Jack Besh could be that guy because he has a bigger body. He can be that pseudo tight end type of player. And Spytek did talk about him in that vein a little bit today. But again, it's theoretical just because he didn't produce that much in his rookie year. So I think maybe finding a veteran guy that could do that to compete with him in case Jack Bech doesn't work out is important.
What would you say about one of those wide receivers from Indiana, like the Omar Cooper or Elijah Surratt? Do you think that would make sense with Fernando Mendoza incoming, just to find someone that's very familiar with him?
Yeah, I mean, I think like having big body guys like that, and he's such a good deep ball and back shoulder ball thrower. I mean, he's probably one of the best fade and back shoulder throwers that I've seen come out of the draft in a long time. And obviously, those guys are very good physical receivers that can do that, and they could add a little bit to the blocking game. But I don't know about the utility of drafting, because you probably would have to draft one of those guys in the second round.
Pretty early, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe one of those guys even get picked up in the first round. Right. So I think they have a lot of needs, and I don't know if they have the luxury of picking a receiver that early.
That makes sense. It does. I mean, they got a lot of holes. As we know that, they got a lot of holes. So we'll close out with this. It's been fantastic. Again, Ted Nguyen from The Athletic is with us. How do you see this marriage, Fernando Mendoza and Clint Kubiak, if it does come to fruition? How do you think that these two pair together?
Yeah, so I'm writing a scouting report on Mendoza right now.
Nice.
I got to talk to his quarterback coach, Chandler Whitner, and I got some good intel about his process, how he learned things at Indiana. But I do think there will be a bigger developmental curve than people expect out of Fernando Mendoza. I think when people think Fernando Mendoza, they think that he's super pro ready.
Yeah.
You could plug and play and that sort of deal. But this guy was, in a shotgun offense at Cal. He was in a pistol shotgun offense, RPO heavy offense in Indiana, very run heavy. So I think there will be an adjustment period, and I don't think that's totally a bad thing. I think he's worthy of being the number one pick. But he's a lot more. He has better traits than people would expect, but it's going to take him a little longer to acclimate into a pro offense than people expect at the same time.
Well, that's why I don't think that he starts day one.
Yeah,
I just don't think. And Tom Brady's been very, adamant about he doesn't like that. John Spicek referred to that earlier today at the podium. So would not be surprised if he doesn't start week one. Well, Ted, fantastic stuff. I know you mentioned you're working on a piece for Fernando Mendoza on Fernando Mendoza. What else are you working on that we should want to look out for?
I'm going to be writing about the quarterbacks in general.
Okay.
So after Mendoza, I'll be working on Ty Simpson, and then writing scouting reports on some of the other big-name guys like Caleb Downs. So that'll be on The Athletic. I have my podcast, Just Win Pod, on YouTube and Apple and Spotify. You can check that out, too.
You and Marshall Newhouse.
Yep.
Yeah, my guy. Matter of fact, he told me at the Super Bowl, he was looking at film of what the offensive line did last year, and he said, I don't know what their goal was on some of these reps. He's like, I didn't know what the goal was. I didn't know what they were trying to achieve. And for a former offensive lineman that's won a Super Bowl to say that was telling to me. Mm-hmm. That was huge. So it can't be that way this year.
Yeah. There's only one way to go up. There's only one way to go, and that's up for this line, hopefully.